Co-Pilot Podcasts.
A minister stands in New Mexico, flames rising before him as he tosses Harry Potter books into what he calls a holy bonfire. Today, we're diving into one of modern literature's most fascinating religious controversies, how a story about a boy wizard became a battleground for faith. We'll explore why some Christians condemn these books while others preach from them, and what this tells us about the intersection of faith and fiction. You know, it's really remarkable how this series has sparked such intense religious debate. The books have sold over 500 million copies worldwide, but they've also faced some of the strongest religious opposition in modern literary history.
What exactly are religious critics so worried about?
Well, the main concerns fall into two categories. First, there's the obvious, the witchcraft and magic elements. Many Protestant, Catholic, and even Orthodox Christian groups argue that the books contain occult or satanic subtexts. And second, there's this worry that the books encourage children to question authority, particularly through Harry's relationship with his aunt and uncle, the Dursleys.
That's interesting. So it's not just about the magic?
No, it goes deeper than that. Some religious groups have even taken legal action, arguing that having Harry Potter books in schools violates the separation of church and state because witchcraft is a government-recognized religion.
Wait, really? They actually tried to ban the books on those grounds?
Yes, and it shows how complex this issue really is. But here's what's fascinating. J.K. Rowling herself identifies as a Christian.
That's right, and she's been quite open about that, hasn't she?
She has, and she's actually said she intentionally incorporated Christian themes into the series, particularly in the final book, Deathly Hallows. The idea that love has power over death is a central Christian concept.
You know, that reminds me of C.S. Lewis and his Narnia series, another example of fantasy with Christian themes.
Exactly. Many supporters of Harry Potter make that same connection. They argue that the magic in Potter is more like fairy tales such as Cinderella or Snow White, not actual occultism.
But some Christians still see it differently, right?
They do, and that's where it gets interesting. The Bulgarian Orthodox Church and parts of the Greek Orthodox Church actually campaigned against the series.
That seems pretty serious.
It is, but there's another side to this. Rowling has noted that her books have been praised from the pulpit by several different faiths.
Really? Churches are actually preaching Harry Potter?
Yes, and some Christian scholars argue that the series actually promotes Christian values, things like friendship, loyalty, courage, and the dangers of temptation and power.
That's fascinating. What do you make of that interpretation?
Well, according to Joy Farmer, a scholar in this field, it's actually a profound misreading to think Harry Potter promotes witchcraft.
Tell me more about that.
Think about it. The books don't really promote religion at all. They actually go out of their way to avoid discussing religion explicitly.
Yet they still managed to spark this huge religious debate.
Exactly. And according to Amanda Cockrell, this intense opposition might have more to do with Harry Potter's massive popularity than its actual content.
That's an interesting point. Do you think the controversy actually helped fuel that popularity?
You know, there's something to that. The more some groups tried to ban the books, the more others defended them. John Killinger, a Congregationalist minister, even wrote an entire book defending Harry Potter from a Christian perspective.
What was his argument?
He actually argued that the Potter stories are narratives of robust faith and morality, and that they're essentially a modern interpretation of the gospel.
That's quite a different take from the holy bonfire approach.
It really is. And you know what's particularly interesting? The final book includes explicitly Christian references, like the biblical quote on Harry's parents' grave. The last enemy that shall be destroyed is death.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that was a biblical quote.
Yes, and it's not subtle. It appears in a church graveyard on Christmas Eve, no less.
So what do you think this tells us about the relationship between faith and fantasy?
Well, one interesting perspective comes from David Mathis, who read the series to his children. He found that, like Tolkien's Lord of the Rings, an intentional, spiritually aware visit to a fantasy world can have real-world value.
That's really interesting.
And you know what's fascinating? The series actually follows patterns found in spiritual traditions across cultures. The idea of a young hero thrust into a world of magic, having to maintain moral purity while mastering power.
Almost like a spiritual journey in itself?
Exactly. In many mystical traditions, children are believed to possess a kind of magic that fades as they grow older. Not literal magic, but an openness to wonder and possibility.
That's a beautiful way to look at it.
And it's worth noting that Harry's story, like many spiritual narratives, is fundamentally about love triumphing over death, a deeply Christian theme.
Do you think that's why some Christian readers have found the book so meaningful?
I think so. The books deal with universal themes of sacrifice, redemption, and the power of love, themes that resonate deeply with Christian theology.
Yet the controversy continues.
It does, and I think that speaks to a larger tension in religious communities about how to engage with popular culture.
What do you mean by that?
Well, some see fantasy as a threat to faith, while others see it as a way to explore and express faith. It's really about different approaches to understanding and interpreting stories.
That makes sense.
And you know what's particularly striking? The very elements that some Christians condemn, the magic, the supernatural, are often the same elements that others use to discuss spiritual truths.
It's almost like they're reading two different books.
Exactly. And that's why this debate is so fascinating. It's not just about Harry Potter, it's about how we interpret stories and their relationship to faith.
So where do you think this leaves us?
Well, I think it shows us that the relationship between faith and fiction is more complex than we might assume. Stories can be windows to spiritual truth, even if, or maybe especially if, they don't set out to be explicitly religious.
That's really profound.
And you know what? Maybe the very fact that Harry Potter can spark such deep theological discussions proves its value, regardless of where you stand on the debate.
I can see that.
After all, any story that gets us thinking deeply about good and evil, love and sacrifice, faith and doubt, that's doing something meaningful, wouldn't you say?
It certainly is. And speaking of meaningful, I think we've reached a good point to wrap up our discussion.
Yes, though I suspect this debate will continue as long as people keep reading Harry Potter.
Which, given those 500 million copies sold, might be for quite a while.
Indeed. And maybe that's exactly as it should be.
Well, that brings us to the end of today's episode of Co-Pilot Podcasts. Remember, whether you're Team Holy Bonfire or Team Hogwarts, the real magic might just be in how these stories get us talking about what we believe and why. Thanks for listening.